And we are going to take this to that level we did yesterday, and that is order of operations. So I mentioned this yesterday. The general concept is in math, we do not read expressions from left to right. We do not read from left to right. When you do that, if you do read from left to right, you will get into all kinds of trouble because math is written not in left to right order, but in order of operations, PEMDAS. So the order of operations is spelled out right here. And just to be super clear, the P stands for do the work in the parentheses first. So work in the parentheses, that makes sense? Do whatever needs to be done inside parentheses first. E stands for doing exponents next. So, something to the second power, something to the third power, whatever it is. We'll do that next. What about the M and the D? What does that stand for? Multiplication or division. Yep, so once we get down to the multiplication division level, that's where we can go left to right. We should go left to right, especially with division. We've got to go in the order that it's presented. And what about the A and the S?
Addition and subtraction.
Yep, add or subtract as indicated. Okay, so again, I can't emphasize this enough, I don't think. In math, we do not read from left to right. We read in the order of operations. We read according to PEMDAS. So, I think a nice example of this to kind of start us off, I'm hoping this is pretty accessible for you, would be number 1. I want to show this one to you, and we'll do some practicing, a lot of practicing with this later. So here we go. As I read this, can I show you a typical mistake? Is it okay if I do that? What I'm about to do is totally wrong. Don't do this, but this is very typical of someone making a mistake. If they read from left to right, what's the first thing they do? Hey, 7 minus 2 is 5. We've just made a mistake, right? We do not read from left to right. We read according to PEMDAS. So I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to do this one correctly. So as I look through this, I do not see any parentheses, so there's no issues with doing the work in the parentheses first. But I do see, and I don't see an exponent either, but I do see a multiplication right there in the middle. So I'm going to do this multiplication before I do anything else. Instead of starting on the right and going left, or the left and going right, I'm starting right in the middle, aren't I? So 2 times 5 is 10. This would be 7 minus 10 plus 6. That was the only multiplication or division that I found. So the only thing left to do here is the addition, subtraction that I see. 7 minus 10 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus 6 is 3. So you get a very different answer if you read it incorrectly. Just like in English, like if you can imagine, like if you took an English sentence, instead of reading it from left to right, you started picking out words and reading in some kind of crazy order, you could totally change the meaning of the sentence. Same way here, if you don't read in PEMDAS, you are totally changing the meaning of the expression. So you guys have any questions about that one?
No.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay if it does, okay if it doesn't. I'd like to help you if it doesn't. Okay, let's do these next two here. This will be the last two that I just directly show you. We'll just do a lot of practicing after this. You can see they get a little bit more complicated. So if I'm going to do PEMDAS, I'm just going to write that off to the side here. PEMDAS. So I'm going to do the work inside any grouping symbols first, parentheses being one of those grouping symbols. As I look through this, you see it, right? I see parentheses. It's right there, and so I'm going to do this first. So in those parentheses, it says 3 minus 8, so I'm going to write 6 plus 2. 3 minus 8 is negative 5. And then I come to that last symbol, absolute value, right? So absolute value is also sort of a grouping symbol in a sense, kind of like parentheses. And so any work I see inside the absolute value, I'm going to think of those almost as parentheses as well. So negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. What do you think about that step? I've done the PA in PEMDAS, right? I've done the work in the parentheses. Make sense? Okay. Do you guys see any exponents in there?
No.
I don't see any exponents either. So now I'm down to the multiplication or division part right there. So multiplication and division, well, I see 2 times negative 5. So that would be negative 10. So it would be 6 plus negative 10. And then, well, let's see here. Absolute value, I could do that on this step. What's the absolute value of negative 15? 15. So now as I glance through this, I see that the only thing left is addition and subtraction. So I'll just go ahead and add these up. What is 6 plus negative 10? Negative 4. And negative 4 plus 15 is? 11. Can I show you the alternative, the incorrect alternative? This is, unfortunately, a pretty standard mistake, and that is when somebody reads from left to right. So if somebody read from left to right, what would be the first thing they'd do? They'd go 6 plus 2 is 8, and maybe do something like that, I don't know. But as soon as they do 6 plus 2 is 8, they are incorrect because they went out of the order of operations. So again, I can't encourage you enough. Do not read from left to right. Read in order of PEMDAS. Okay, and then I didn't mean to do that. There we go. The last one is number 3. And number 3, again, with PEMDAS out here to the side, do you guys see any work that needs to be done inside the parentheses?
The cube.
Plenty, yeah. You got lots of stuff in there. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've got 8 minus 3, and then 25 minus, and you said 3 cubed. We're going to do that first. Does anybody know what 3 cubed is?
27.
27. Nice. That whole thing is squared minus. There's some work I could do in these grouping symbols, the absolute values here. What's negative 16 divided by positive 8? Negative 2. So I still have not done the absolute values yet. I'll do those here in a second. So I did some good work there, but isn't there still work to be done inside parentheses? I haven't finished that yet. So I'm going to go keep going with that. So it'd be 8 minus 3. What is 25 minus 27? Negative 2. That whole thing is squared. And I'll go ahead and do this now. What's the absolute value of negative 2? 2. Can I point something out that would be incorrect? Maybe somebody would be tempted to do this. Are you watching? Everybody keep your eyes up there real quick. Somebody might have been tempted to do this. I wrote it in red. You see it? Do you understand why that's wrong? You need to do the work inside the parentheses first, and those parentheses happen to be absolute values, which means you need to do the absolute value of negative 2 before you do anything else. And technically, that's multiplication. So we can't do that. Okay, let's finish this one up. Let's see here. I've got all the work in the parentheses is done. The next thing up is exponents. And you can see that there's an exponent in there, squared. And this is where you, having watched the video, is going to pay off. What is negative 2 inside the parentheses squared?
Positive.
Negative 2 times negative 2, which is?
Positive 4.
Positive, yes, positive 4. You are correct. Well done. So 8 minus 3 times 4 minus 2. So far I've done all the work in the parentheses. I just did the exponent. Now I'm down to multiplication division. Do you guys see the multiplication there in the middle? Again, I'm still not reading from left to right. I'm doing all the PEMDAS order here. So in the middle there, 3 times 4 is 12, so it would be 8 minus 12 minus 2. Finally, I'm done with multiplication division. I'm down to the addition and subtraction. What is 8 minus 12? And negative 4 minus 2 is? Our final value there is negative 6. That one's a little more involved, isn't it? Okay. You can see a kind of scaffold of that. I hope you can see from like pretty easy to medium to hard. Hope that makes sense. So your job now is to flip over to that next page, and you got 3 examples of varying difficulty, similar to what we just did. And so let's just do that next page. Let's just do 1, 2, 3. I think there's a couple more on the next page, but let's just do 1, 2, and 3. Let's start off with number 1. Let's do these kind of together. How you do number 1, then we'll check your answer. So go ahead and get started on that one. We go. So number 1, following order of operations. There's no parentheses. There's no work in the parentheses to be done because there are no parentheses. But there is an exponent, right? You saw that. What's 3 to the second power? It's 9. Yep. So we'd go 9 times 5 minus 6 divided by 3. So now we've taken care of the parentheses. There were none. Took care of the exponents. Now we're down to multiplication and division. So we're going to go 9 times 5, 45, minus 6 divided by 3. 2. 45 minus 2 is 43. So our final value there would be 43. So again, please look at your work, look at my work, compare, make sure we agree, make sure you don't have any questions, because if you do, I want you to say something. Anything at all? Okay, keep working on number 2. Looks like a lot of you are getting started on number 2. It's very good. It's being just like a bigger parentheses. Maybe you've seen that before. So it's like a parentheses within a parentheses. Sometimes they'll use a bracket to indicate that. So I'm going to do the work in there first. Can you see? Maybe some of you were tempted to do this. Are you watching? I'm about to make a mistake. 3 plus 2, 5. I'm wrong, right? I'm reading from left to right. In math, we do not read from left to right. We read PEMDAS as far as the order goes. So what I'm going to do is 3 plus 2, bracket, -1 minus. I'm going to do the work in those inside parentheses first. 4 minus 5, -1. So inside there, it ends up being -1 minus -1. So maybe on this step, we could just go plus, plus. So to finish out the work in the parentheses, I'm going to write -1 plus 1, which is 0. Okay. So then this whole time there has been no symbol between the 2 and the parentheses, right? There's no symbol there at all. What's understood to be there? Multiplication, right? So 2 times 0, 0. 3 plus 0, 3. Good? Any questions? You guys are picking this up well. That's great. Okay, if you haven't already started on number 3, please do. And we'll check that answer as well here in a second. My steps, like number 3. This is different, right? This is different than the other ones we've done. It's a fraction. And so I want you guys to think of the numerator almost as kind of its own little grouping symbol and the denominator as its own little grouping symbol. So in other words, we're going to work on the numerator all by itself, the denominator all by itself, and then if there's any reducing we can do, we'll do that at the end. That makes sense? So I'm going to look at that numerator first. And in the numerator, I see some parentheses. So I'm going to write 72 minus... And within those parentheses, do you guys see the multiplication in there?
Yeah.
2 times 4. So 2 times 4 is 8. So I'm going to write 2 minus 8. And in the denominator, I also see some parentheses. And in there I see an exponent. So I'm going to go 9 times 10 plus 2 squared is 4. So right now all I'm doing is the work inside the parentheses in the numerator, as well as in the denominator. And there's still more work to be done. So I'm going to write now 72 minus 2 minus 8, -6. So I've handled the parentheses there. Down below, there's more work to be done. We got 10 squared minus, it's 90 plus 4 as I handle that multiplication. Is that making sense? Okay. And then let's see here in the numerator. I'm going to come up here, I guess. In the numerator... 72 minus 6 is really 72 plus 6, so I got 78. Is that okay? And in the denominator, I'll handle the exponent now. 10 squared is 100. And then 90 plus 4 is 94. And 100 minus 94 is 6. So 78/6 would be a correct value here, but I think it's reducible, right? So let's see here. 2 certainly goes into both. So you could write 39 thirds. But that reduces 2, doesn't it? Did you guys get 13?
Yeah.
13. So my final value here would be 13.
Are we supposed to divide it out or just reduce it?
In this case, that's one and the same, right? So technically it's 13 over 1. Oh, are you talking about like a mixed number sort of thing, or no?
No, are we supposed to divide like 78 by 6, or are we supposed to just reduce it as far as we can?
Either way, you'll get 13.
For this one, but is that true for everything else?
So you're talking about like, do we go decimals and all that kind of stuff?
Not really, more like if it was
So let's say,
20 over
sure.
40 or something, do you divide it or?
So you're saying,
Yeah, I guess it
do you go to 1/2 or do you go to 0.5?
Yeah.
I would take either one of those. Let's do something like this though. Like what if you had 6/14? What do you do with that? I would prefer that you just reduced it. So this would reduce down to 3/7. The reason why I would say that I would prefer that you reduce that one is because 3/7 is going to be one of those irrational, or not irrational, but decimal numbers that just goes on and on forever and ever, perhaps. And you're going to have to cut it off and round it. And I would prefer an exact answer as opposed to a rounded answer. So I just go 3/7. Along those lines, what if you did, I don't know what you guys are used to, what if you had something like, What if you worked all the way through and you got down to the end and you got 10/3? Are you guys comfortable with leaving it as 10/3, or are you going to feel like you need to do 3 1/3?
I could do 10.
Will you please do 10/3? Will you please eliminate that last step? Please? I know like probably your 7th and 8th grade teachers are like, you must go mixed number, right?
Yeah.
You must not. I don't think you need to, and I would prefer that you didn't. Do you know why? Let me ask you a question.
More work.
Number one, hey, it's more work that you might mess up, right, Callie?
Yeah.
And so that's worth something. But let me ask you this. Is this, like when you see 3 and 1/3, what is the operation in between the 3 and the 1/3? Is it 3 plus 1/3, 3 times 1/3, 3 divided by 1/3, 3 minus 1/3, or is it something else entirely?
Multiplication plus.
It's plus. It's actually 3 and 1/3 is actually 3 plus 1/3. Hence the reason why I don't think it's worth it to go to that, because there's confusion. It looks like it should be multiplication, but it's actually addition. It's just like one more convention of writing things to me that makes it more confusing, and I would rather not do that. So can we just go 10/3? Yay, cool. Okay, love it. Would you guys move on to number 4, unless there's a question on this one? Did 13 work out okay? Okay, awesome. So move on to number 4. See how this goes for you. I'm not gonna even do that. I'm gonna go ahead and start doing the work in the parentheses first. So it's gonna be 10 minus 2. We'll think of those absolute values as grouping symbols. So 4 minus 8 is -4, plus 3 squared minus 3 parentheses. Inside the parentheses, 2 squared is 4 minus 7. So it's a good first step. It does not have to be your first step. That's just a good one there. 10 minus 2. Well, the absolute value of -4 is just 4. So I'm going to put times 4. Does that times make sense? Because there was no symbol originally in between there. Plus 3 squared minus 3 parentheses 4 minus 7 is -3. You guys still tracking okay? Do you have any questions? I definitely don't want to confuse you. That would be bad. Okay, fair enough. So I'm going to do the only exponent in there. 10 minus 2 times 4, 3 squared is 9. Minus 3 parentheses -3. Now I'm down to the multiplication division step, so I'm going to go through this carefully. The first multiplication I come to is 2 times 4, so it's going to be 10 minus 8, still plus 9, minus 3 times -3. Does that make sense? 3 times -3 is -9. We get that magical minus a negative, right? So I'm going to go ahead and convert that over to plus, a positive. And finally, I am down to these addition, subtraction steps. 10 minus 8 is 2. 2 plus 9 is 11. And 11 plus 9, of course, is 20. Doing pretty good? I saw a lot of 20s as I was walking around.
Yeah.
Okay. Give you just a second to ask a question if you've got one. Okay. By the way, just something to think about. We're starting to get into stuff that's a little more complicated. If we're going to leave here in about 5 minutes, as you leave here today, if you think, man, that number 4, like when he did it in class, it made sense and everything, but I know that I'm going to forget how to do that by the time I get home and work on some homework or whatever. Remember, I'm going to post this video. We're not done yet. I'm going to post this video here in a little bit. You could always go back and watch this last part, and you could watch the steps and hear me talk, and if anybody has a question, you can hear that too. Do you see how that could be helpful? So consider doing that if you need to. Okay, the last thing here we're going to do is we're going to look at the error that showed up in this. Somebody did this question, and they messed it up. Did you find it? Did you see where they messed up?
They did. I
No,
found it, but
I just happened to
the
miss
wrong
the
offers
same
was
But
answer.
then I did it and I got the exact same answer as they got.
No way.
Yeah, same.
That is weird, isn't
We
it?
all got.
Yeah.
That is weird.
The correct answer.
It's the correct answer, but they got it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
It's the one.
You know what? It's because of the 1.
If it wasn't a one.
If it was anything other than a -1, it would have showed up as a wrong answer, but that -1, that's what it is.
Put the exclamation
Okay,
though. didn't do that.
Because 9 minus 5
Look at it.
times 1 is the same thing as 9 minus 5 times 1.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
And
it's the 1 that does it. Interesting. So the error, guys, is right here. Do you see how they went out of order of operations? Whether they got the right answer or not,
This is kind of a bad example.
which they somehow did. Yeah, we should probably change it to be something other than a -1 in there, and then we'd be able to see it. Interesting. I'll change that for the next class. We'll see what happens. Okay.